Good day and welcome to EPA's Sustainable Materials Management webinar entitled Preventing Food Waste Upstream, a Source Reduction Approach, Part 3. This webinar is brought to you by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. My name is Andre Villasenor, an EPA Sustainable Management of Food Coordinator based in Southern California. I serve as your moderator today. Jorge of EPA Region 1 is sitting behind the technology controls of our webinar. Gracias, Jorge. There are hundreds of us on this webinar today, and one thing we have in common is that we all eat food. Even my dwarf hamster, she loves California almonds. In life, sometimes there are leftovers, like a tray of steamed brown rice from yesterday's lunch buffet at the stadium. Or on Saturday night, we might wonder, how did we end up with 20 extra dinner salads at this wedding? Therefore, we seek solutions for purchasing and serving just the right amount of food on a regular basis. Our goal today is for you to put into practice source reduction, reduce the volume of surplus food generated. By now, you should have the GoToWebinar application running and be able to see the welcome presentation on your screen. The speaker slides are attached to this webinar control panel for you to download. Please use the GoToWebinar control panel to type your questions into the area that says Questions, and then click Send to submit it to us. After today's recorded webinar, there will be a short evaluation. Please fill it out. Your feedback is vital to helping us provide the highest quality speakers and information to meet your needs. You may have heard of the food recovery hierarchy. Today we'll focus on the top tier of the food recovery hierarchy, which is source reduction. We'll start with an intro to source reduction, and then our special guest speakers, Food Recovery Challenge awardees, will describe examples that prevent wasted food at the source. Our speakers are Mr. J. Cody Lilstrom, Zero Waste Program Manager with the Boulder County Resource Conservation Division in Colorado. Mr. Timothy Oliveira, Support Services Commander at the Boulder County Jail. Mr. Scott Ferguson, Park Ranger with Tennessee State Parks. And Ms. Kelsey Davis, Environmental Scientist with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. For bios, go to our SMM Web Academy website, epa.gov/SMM. Please note this disclaimer, and remember to type your questions throughout the webinar. Let's get an overview of source reduction. Established in 1970, EPA's mission is to protect human health and the environment. EPA commenced its sustainable management of food efforts in 2011 with the launch of the Food Recovery Challenge. Since then, we've created a library of food recovery tools and resources for you and engaged with partners across the country. What fraction of material is going to U.S. landfills or incinerators as food? With 1/3 of food going uneaten each year, excess food is the single largest type of material going for disposal in the U.S., accounting for over 21% of the American waste stream. At the retail and consumer levels, the value of food loss and waste in the U.S. is estimated at over $161 billion. The average consumer spends $370 per year on excess food. Meanwhile, nearly 1 in 7 U.S. inhabitants are food insecure. It's estimated that if we recovered 15% of our excess food, we could feed 25 million people. In 2015, EPA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced a national goal to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by the year 2030. Then, last year, continuing with the momentum, EPA, FDA, and the USDA signed an agreement dubbed the Winning on Reducing Food Waste Initiative to improve national coordination on the sustainable management of food. In effect, our federal government is leading us in a call to action to unify behind this goal. How can we collectively cut food waste in half in the next 11 years. We lead by example with the food recovery hierarchy, which ranks actions from least preferred to most preferred that we can take to reduce, recover, and recycle excess food. Landfill and incineration are the least preferred methods of managing our food excess. Going up the hierarchy, compost by turning food scraps into a valuable soil amendment. Industrial uses include sending food scraps to an anaerobic digester, which recovers their methane for use as energy. Divert safe food scraps to animal feed. If you do have unserved surplus, donate fresh, wholesome food to people. The primary goal of the food recovery hierarchy is to make our food production and consumption efficient and sustainable through source reduction, reduce the volume of surplus food generated. There is good reason to source reduce. Champions 12.3 prepared a report called The Business Case for Reducing Food Loss and Waste. After reviewing 1,200 business sites across 700 companies in 17 countries, the report shows that for every $1 invested in source reduction strategies, like measuring excess food and improving inventory management, $14 are saved through returns such as reduced excess food management costs and avoided food purchases. Are you a restaurant, university, grade school, manufacturer, or grocery store looking to prevent food loss and waste? EPA produced 5 food loss prevention tip sheets for the sectors I mentioned. Access these tip sheets on the source reduction webpage of EPA's Sustainable Management of Food website. How would your organization like to lead by example and earn recognition for its efforts in excess food prevention and food recovery? In EPA's Food Recovery Challenge, known as the FRC, organizations improve their sustainable management of food practices and report the results annually. The FRC provides support and public recognition to organizations engaging in reducing, recovering, and recycling excess food. FRC participants measure and sustainably manage their uneaten food, while endorsers educate others about the sustainable management of food and the FRC. FRC participants use their own password-protected account to measure and submit data on up to 3 different source reduction activities, as well as donation, anaerobic digestion, and composting. In 2017, over 1,000 Food Recovery Challenge participants and endorsers prevented over 18,000 tons of excess food from being created through source reduction. They saved over $31 million in avoided tipping fees from landfills. Join the Food Recovery Challenge today at epa.gov/Food Recovery Challenge. In sum, cut your excess food in half by 2030 and save money with these 3 practices. 1, measure your surplus food and set excess food prevention goals. 2, earn recognition by participating in EPA's Food Recovery Challenge. And 3, focus on source reduction solutions. Our source reduction resources are housed in EPA's Sustainable Management of Food website. You can also contact your EPA regional representative with questions about the Food Recovery Challenge. And now, let's welcome our speakers. Our first speakers are Cody Lilstrom of the Boulder County Resource Conservation Division in Colorado and Tim Oliveira of the Boulder County Jail, which earned the 2018 Food Recovery Challenge Regional Award in EPA Region 8. Congratulations. Cody and Tim, you're on.
All right, thanks, Andre. We're incredibly happy to have received that award, so that cowbell is pretty great. So my name is Cody Lilstrom. I work with Boulder County in the Resource Conservation Division, and I manage all of our zero waste programs, both internally and countywide. And with me, sharing an office today is Tim Oliveira, who works out at the Boulder County Jail.
Yeah, with the Sheriff's Office, and I oversee our support services division at the jail. And part of that falls under my responsibility as our food service unit and division.
So he and I will be kind of trading off for this presentation today. We'll start off with a little bit of the history of our jail program in terms of what we've done for composting and food service prep and that kind of thing. We'll go into a little bit of the jail's garden, which is a pretty unique program where inmates take part in growing their own food. And then we'll kind of conclude with some next steps on source reduction and what we're planning on for the future. So to start off, a little bit of the history of the program. Kitchen composting was initiated in 2015 at the Boulder County Jail, and that was actually a collection system that was then hauled to an industrial composter. But before 2015, the jail had its own system, and Tim will talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, prior to 2015, we had our on-site composting, two large cylindrical composters out back that was used to compost any excess food items. And as a result of that composting, we would then utilize the byproduct as fertilizer for our garden. When we tried to move away from any pesticides and do everything naturally, that compost material came in handy. Unfortunately, the upkeep of those units and there's some other issues and challenges around those units caused us to move away from them. However, prior to 2015, we were using that system for quite some time.
Yeah, so because of those challenges, they decided and worked with us to get compost collection service out at the jail in 2015. And as you can see from the numbers here, we've steadily increased our compost collection over the last few years, and then as a result of our 2017 efforts, we got the 2018 EPA Food Recovery Challenge Regional Award. So we were very, very pleased and proud to represent Boulder County and to be recognized by the EPA for our composting efforts. We at the jail, additionally, we compost both front-end scraps and back-end uneaten foods, those things that can't be reused.
With regards to our jail garden, we have a 1-acre plot on our jail campus, and we've had that for quite some time now. And it's a garden that is manually labored through our inmates who are sentenced to county time. They provide all of the physical labor that goes into growing and producing the produce in that garden. It's overseen by both civilian staff as well as correctional staff. And we have a collaboration with Colorado State University and the Master Gardener program. They come out and they help teach our inmates how to go about creating a garden, teach them about maybe sustaining their own gardens once they become members of society again. And then they help us determine what type of crops can be best utilized and grown on our 1-acre parcel. And they work very closely with our food service staff at the beginning of each growing season to determine what food items or produce items would be best utilized in our kitchen to supplement our kitchen efforts and food efforts. So it's a quite productive garden. As you can see, in 2018, we were able to produce 13,836 pounds of produce. Whatever we don't use in the jail is sent off to local farmers, also shared with local food banks and so forth for further food consumption by others in need. As you can see here, here's a couple of pictures of our 1-acre garden. We've produced anywhere from watermelons, lettuce, cabbages, you name it, we will produce it. We've done corn at times, but corn can be quite hard on a small parcel such as 1 acre. We also have created a greenhouse a year ago so that we can actually have our seedlings starting to germinate even during the winter months. So when it comes time to planting, we can just transplant our our seedlings right into our garden and get ready for the next growing cycle. And that's just another picture of our garden.
All right, so kind of next steps for our jail composting program, and kind of just integrating more into the food waste hierarchy, is source reduction efforts, and kind of what this whole webinar is focused on, obviously. As Andre mentioned in his presentation earlier, source reduction is even more important than composting, because it's actually avoiding the production and waste of food in the beginning to prevent it from happening. And one thing that we've found when we've explored different source reduction techniques is that collaboration is really key to these efforts. You can't do it alone. You have to really work with everyone who's involved. At the jail, that includes all of the jail staff, the inmates, because a lot of the inmates, they work in the kitchen, and they have to know the protocols and the procedures for reducing waste and not creating that waste in the first place. The Resource Conservation Division assists the jail. We try to give them any sort of best practices, literature that we find out there that they might not be aware of. We've used some lean path food waste tips literature before, and we'll continue to do that and help them out. The jail utilizes their supplier for their food is Aramark, so they have to, out of the jail, they have to coordinate with the food supplier to get the right type of food, the right amounts of food, ensure that they get the food that will be the most popular and will be consumed the best. Also, the garden consultant, as Tim mentioned, the master gardener consults with that garden plot and helps to kind of maximize the utilization of the produce that's grown there. And one thing we've noticed that's kind of interesting with source reduction is that it's fairly hard to measure. Whereas compost, you get a scale ticket, and you have a weight, and you have a tonnage, and you have that metric at the end of the year. With source reduction, you're not measuring pounds collected for composting. You're really going for a decrease in total amount, which, if you're looking at pounds collected, can actually look like you're diverting less, which in a way is true, because you're not producing as much. But it's important that you kind of, when you're implementing source reduction techniques, to recognize that though you are producing less and your tonnage is less, that's not a bad thing. That's attributable to a good practice of source reduction and utilizing everything that you have on hand to the best that you can. Another interesting hurdle or potential difficulty with this is turnover. You have jail staff turnover. You can have staff turnover at Resource Conservation. We had a staff member who was in charge of working with the jail that was with us for 2 or 3 years and really got involved, and then they left their position and we had to recruit a new person, and getting them up to speed can kind of put you back a few months in terms of progress. So those types of things can be difficult. And now, Tim, if you want to speak to some other things that you've encountered as well.
Well, some other challenges for us is constantly keeping our staff, security staff, civilian staff, educated on the efforts of how important it is to do their part on source reduction within the jail. Obviously, training our labor force, which are obviously inmates who work in the kitchen, to be understanding of why we do what we do, why it's so important that we make effort to reduce, contribute to source reduction efforts, why it's so important to follow the protocols and policies we have in place for composting properly. So it requires a lot of buy-in from a lot of people who have different interest levels on why it's important to do this, or whether or not the effort is necessary. So we have to constantly educate everyone. And one of the biggest challenges that we also encountered when working with the former person here at the Resource Conservation was having them understand the unique nature of running a jail or correctional facility, and some of the efforts that might seem quite easily implemented in other areas of the community. There are unique challenges within a security environment, such as a jail or correctional facility. They're just challenges, that's all they are. They're not impossible barriers, but it requires a lot of education. So that collaboration that Cody alluded to earlier is key, and I think that's what's made us able to make the strides we've made in recent years, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. Yeah, a couple of things that we did too, if you notice in the bullet points on the next steps, is that when I stepped into this position, prior to my overseeing the kitchen, we had a very heavily soy-based diet that was being put out for the inmate population to consume. That was very poorly received, and as a result, you can imagine what the waste that was coming as a result of that. So we listened to the complaints, the concerns, and the issues brought about by our population, and we took that to heart, and we changed that diet. So it required some effort of sitting down and reorienting our contract with Aramark, and said, we understand that this is going to be more costly. We're willing to put the money forward as a county in this on the front end, with the hopes that was gained on the back end by having much more significant source reduction. It all paid itself off in the end. And lo and behold, that surely showed it to be the case. Also paying attention to special diets, religious issues, special diets, anybody that comes in. We have a very diverse community that we service. So we have a multitude of religious and personal belief systems. So as a result, we provide a wide array of diets with the hope that by doing that and providing what is being requested and what is really being sought after, we will have better consumption of the product we put forward. So those kinds of efforts, I think, have contributed to some of our efforts in the jail and source reduction.
Great. So as we are looking forward to expand our program and get further source reduction in place, as well as continuing our composting and expanding that, what we're able to take as well. Some of the key things that we've looked at are analyzing meal popularity, and as Tim mentioned earlier, the jail has already done a lot of that work and reduced a lot of those waste products on the back end, because they know what the inmates are going to like. They know better what to serve so that it is consumed more fully. Another thing we're looking into, and we haven't actually done yet, is purchasing misshapen or ugly fruits. And that's something where potentially you could get cost savings as well along with that. A carrot, if it looks as weird as that carrot in this picture, you're not going to notice if it's chopped up and put into a soup, or as part of a salad bar or something like that. So there's little cost saving measures there, and also those ugly fruits that they probably aren't able to be sold at a grocery store. It's reducing the amount of produce that needs to be produced by taking those ugly fruits. We're looking to collaborate between the jail garden staff and food service staff. And Tim, actually, I think you mentioned that work has kind of already started.
That's already started, yeah. And we'll continue to make that effort. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so making sure that the items that are grown at the jail garden are congruent with the menu items that are being offered at the jail. So there's another great way of, you don't have to go get produce from Chile or even as close as California. You can get it super locally. It only travels 100 feet to get consumed, and so you cut down on those source pollution sources and that kind of thing as well, which is important too. We've looked at harvesting only what is needed from the jail garden, and then, as we mentioned earlier, we've already done some of that work, or the jail has already done some of that work to divert those unused foods. If they're grown and have excess at the jail, they take them to a local farmer who uses it for animal feed. And I know that in years past, the jail has tried, and maybe Tim, you can speak to this a little bit better, to get food donated to a local food bank or something like that.
Yeah, that's an effort that we continually try to work out. We have local community resources that we go to, and we'll donate leftover produce to them so that the local food banks can have a well-stocked supply.
Yeah. So that's another important piece. The jail already is using, you know, the technique of reusing leftover foods. If it's still usable after the first day, you can reuse it for another meal, and the next day, if you can still salvage that food, and that cuts down on that food waste on the back end as well. As we mentioned, that last bullet, just to kind of reiterate, diverting food waste for livestock rather than sending it directly to compost, giving it one more beneficial use before it meets its end. So those are just some of the things that we've looked at. We feel like we're well on our way, but we definitely have you know, a lot more that we can do to reduce our footprint in terms of wasted food, and to be better composters, to be better stewards of the food that is used out at the jail.
Agreed. And
that concludes our portion of this presentation. We want to thank again the EPA for inviting us to present on this material. It's something that we're excited about, the collaboration between resource conservation and the jail, and everyone involved, speaking from resource conservation. So
same here from the Sheriff's Office. We greatly appreciate the opportunity and the recognition. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, and thank you for that wonderful presentation, Tim and Cody, and thank you for focusing on source reduction. Jorge, I believe there might be a couple of questions for them.
Yes, one is, how time consuming is having a garden the size of yours?
It's actually not extremely time consuming, because we have a number of inmates that are sentenced to any length of stay between a couple of months to sometimes up to a year. So we have the intact labor force, if you will. Obviously, during the spring and summer months, it takes quite a bit of time. We'll usually have the garden staffed from as early as 6 a.m. in the morning or 5:45 in the morning till as late as 6 p.m. in the evening. So that'll be staffed, but a lot of that, like I said, is inmate labor. Our civilian staff and sworn staff that oversee them are usually there from the normal business hours from about 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it's well worth the efforts. I hope that answers that question for you.
Okay, and I have one more. Who made the decision to do the garden and compost?
The garden has been on our site as long as I've been there. I've been at the Sheriff's Office for 19 years now, and it was already on site even back then. So I can't tell you specifically who started it, but I can tell you it's been in place for quite some time now, and it's been well received, and it's a big contributor. Now, you had a second part to that question. What was the second part again?
And the compost.
The compost, that was started, I want to say, about maybe 12 years ago or so, and that was initiated by the sergeant that was in charge of overseeing that area. He took the initiative to look into the benefits of composting, took the effort to get the units in place, and if not for his initiative, I don't know if that would have come to fruition at that time, but I would have to say it was that sergeant's foresight that got that started.
Okay, thank you. We will now continue to the next presentation. We'll be answering more Q&A at the end of everybody's presentation.
Fabulous. Thank you for that, Jorge. And once again, thank you, Tim and Cody. And now we're going to move on to Park Ranger Scott Ferguson of Tennessee State Parks to talk about the Forge Restaurant at Montgomery Bell State Park, which earned a 2018 Food Recovery Challenge National Award in the category of source reduction. That's sensational. Welcome to the webinar, Scott. You're on.
Thank you so much. More cowbell. We always want more cowbell. I appreciate the introduction. I'm coming to you from beautiful Montgomery Bell in Middle Tennessee here. To get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are and where we are. Montgomery Bell State Park is a resort park about 30 miles west of Nashville, Tennessee, off of US Highway 70. The park, as I said, is a resort, so we offer a lot of amenities. Just go over a few of those for you to get a sense of where we are. We're a 4,000-acre park. We get to the tune of 920,000 visitors a year, which is nothing to sneeze at. So we have a lot of waste created here, a lot to work with. The park has 3 man-made lakes, Lake Acorn, Creech Hollow, and Woodhaven. We have a 600-acre natural area here. Myself, I've been assigned to our Go Green program here on the park to manage it and to improve it into the near future. Let's go to the next slide, please. There we go. Our mission statement for Tennessee State Parks is to preserve and protect in perpetuity unique examples of natural, cultural, and scenic areas, and provide a variety of safe, quality outdoor experiences through a well-planned and professionally managed system of state parks. Let's go to the next one. Our administration decided to take our namesake of environment and conservation seriously and decided to implement what is our Go Green program. Our regional manager, Robin Peeler, has been assigned to direct that from Nashville, and they have created system-wide sustainability guidelines for all 56 of our Tennessee state parks here, with the goal of enhancing our wildlife habitat, protecting our land and water resources, and reducing our waste. So let's talk a little bit about how we got our program started. Being a resort park, let's go to the next slide. Source reduction. Being a resort park here, like I said, we have a lot of amenities at our inn and conference center. We have the Forge restaurant. We decided that we're going to focus on that to try to reduce our waste over there. As it says here on the slide, source reduction is activities designed to reduce the volume, mass, or toxicity products throughout the life cycle. Includes the design, manufacture, use, and disposal of products with minimum toxic content, minimum volume of material, and/or a longer useful life. So getting started over at the Forge, we decided to create logs to track our staff's waste disposal, staff waste. Each item that would have previously, before the FRC, gone to waste due to improper storage techniques or unable to reserve it as is and find a way to reuse this food in another recipe or repurpose it into something new. Our staff also weighs all items under health and safety codes. They're unable to reserve on the buffet, which are still acceptable to donate. Our restaurant also has separate containers in the kitchen to collect all compostable prep waste and post-consumer plate scrapings, which are then weighed and taken to the compost pile on site. We selected a site near the back of the park and built our own composting area about 3 years ago. Our waste logs are submitted each month to one of our environmental scientists who's helped tremendously with this, Kelsey Davis. We submit that to her, and she's also an endorser of our program. Let's go to the next slide. The Inn and Conference Center is rather large, and was updated in the late 90s. It's 120 Lakeview inn rooms with 6,000 square foot of meeting space, and our restaurant seats 180 guests. 3 buffets daily, so plenty of food waste. Catering and menu orders are also done. Let's go to the next one. As I was saying, Kelsey Davis is one of our overseers of the program here, one of our trainers that has come through and helped us to see the light, so to speak, on improving our sustainability here. The Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices is what she works out of. And we also had another environmental scientist, Robert Wadley, that has come down and helped us with the creation of our composting area. Park Manager Pat Wright has had a large role in ensuring the success of this program as well. Let's go to the next one. So, the Food Recovery Challenge. I really appreciate the efforts that have been put into creating this challenge. I think it has helped a lot of us to have the motivation to move forward with these things and just see how beneficial that they are. Some of the things that have improved our system here are just-in-time purchasing system, which is basically a cost accounting purchasing strategy. You purchase goods so that they're delivered just as they're needed to meet the customer demand. Less inventory on hand normally means that you're going to pay less in storage and less in insurance costs. And interestingly, it also requires less cash in the short term. Some of the other techniques that we've implemented: improved storage and organization techniques in our freezers and food storage areas. We have reduced options on our buffet, providing smaller serving utensils on our buffet as well. We have attempted to modify our menus and serving portions to help with sustainability. And we've tried to be flexible in menu planning to accommodate the use of excess food from previous meals. And repurposing example of that is turning stale bread into homemade croutons. Next slide. Our restaurant here weighs, tracks, and keeps record of all disposed of, diverted, donated, and composted food. The restaurant staff has 4 separate food waste logs in which they weigh each food item and record it in the appropriate log. Can we go to the next slide? I've got a picture here of one of the logs that we use, and also a photo of the scales that we use. It's just a simple scale system. It's pretty portable. You can move it around wherever you need it. Easy to use. I recommend it. And try to keep track of our food waste log, maintaining records of each individual food item that we dispose of, how much it weighed, and for what reason that it was disposed. Food log for source reduction or diverted food, food log for all food that will be donated to a local charity, and also food log for all compostable scraps and plate scrapings from post-consumer leftovers. Let's go to the next slide. Next one. Okay, so here I've got a slide showing our overall food waste diversion, comparing 2016 to 2017. And this is a great example, I think, for everybody to show how much you can actually have an effect and improve the waste that you're putting out. It really shocked me, and I think everybody else that works here, and helped with the enthusiasm of the program once we put these numbers out and had some meetings with our staff to show them exactly what their efforts are going towards. In 2016, before the FRC challenge, we had 118.49 tons of waste. And the next year, 2017, after implementing all of the things that I previously listed, all the strategies that are previously listed, we had 61.05 tons of waste. That's 57 tons of food waste that were diverted, which we're really proud of, and we're going to keep working hard towards improving that even more. This resulted in a monetary savings of nearly $4,000 for the park, which is nothing to laugh at. I think any business could benefit from implementing these goals and their strategies. Next slide, please. And as was mentioned in the last presentation, the obstacles we run into are retraining your staff. If you have a facility that may have a lot of turnover, such as ours, we have waitresses that come in and cooks, and we have quite a bit of turnover there at times. You'll have someone trained and going really good at it. So I recommend in dealing with that, putting together a booklet, some kind of a binder or folder with detailed instructions and goals that we want to meet. I think it helps a little bit in the continuity of the program. And another thing that I recommend in having a successful program is trying to change the attitudes of your employees. You're going to have a lot of people that say this is just extra work for us. We've got enough to do. You know, we're so busy. And if you can just change their mindset by having regular meetings and showing them on paper some of the hard numbers like I just went over, I think it helps their attitude and helps them see that they're having a positive impact, not just for their place of work, but for the environment as a whole. And let's go to the next one. Some takeaways. We have been blessed with extremely professional oversight in Robin Peeler, Kelsey Davis, and my manager, Pat Wright, keeping this program going. It's really important to keep checking in with staff to make sure that the program is continuing. If you're absent for a little bit, they will slack off and it will start going by the wayside quickly. So I recommend at least every other day checking in with your staff, making sure that they're logging the numbers and going over it with the new employees as much as possible, which is continued mentoring. And I think through that, you will be able to successfully change your culture at your place of business. And like I said before, share your successes with the employees. This award has generated a lot of excitement around sustainability and source reduction that even 2 years ago we didn't have here. So the employees here are extremely honored and proud to have been awarded this. We are going to place our plaque over and at the end at the Ford restaurants for everyone to see. And I think this will help us in going forward to be able to improve our program even more. I've got a few photos here at the end of the presentation. This is the back of the Ford's restaurant. Let's go to the next one. That's on Lake Acorn here in the park. It's a beautiful scenic area for all types of gatherings and events. Would recommend to anyone to look us up online, to add us on Facebook, and to consider coming by the park. I would love to speak with any and all of you that want to call or visit or email. And that will conclude my portion of the presentation. I appreciate everyone's time.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott, and congratulations on the Source Reduction Award. Jorge, what questions do we have? You're welcome. What questions do we have for Scott? I know we've got several related to source reduction.
Okay. How often are food waste logs reviewed to make decisions for source reduction?
We are reviewing them every 2 days at this point in the process, which, like I said, I recommend. If you go a week without reviewing them, a lot of times the staff will have slacked off and you will lose track very quickly of what's going on.
Okay, and how did staff respond to adding the measurement work to their load?
There was some groaning with adding the transport from the kitchen area to the composting site. The staff we've had some turnover in it, and when you have new employees coming in that are trained to do this from day one, I think that helps. So right now we've got a staff that are doing the transport that are all new. They have all come in the last couple of years. So this has just been part of the job for them, and I think that helps.
Okay, thank you. I think we should continue on, and we'll ask more questions at the end of the presentations.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Before we go to our final speaker, let's do our final poll question, Jorge.
Okay. Which of these food management activities does your organization most engage in? Source reduction, feed hungry people, feed animals, industrial uses, or composting? Give it a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. 20% said source reduction, 17% feed hungry people, and 2% feed animals, 3% industrial uses, and 57% composting.
Great. Thank you for participating in that poll to all attendees, just to get an idea of where people are in the food recovery hierarchy. We're now going to culminate with our final speaker, Kelsey Davis of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, which earned the 2018 Food Recovery Challenge Honorable Mention Award in the category of Endorser. Well done. Kelsey, welcome aboard to the webinar.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying these welcomes. Thank you very much for having me speak on the webinar today, and also I want to say thank you to Scott for those very nice words. So like you said, my name is Kelsey Davis, and I'm with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. I specifically work for the Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices. And today I'm going to touch on what we did as an endorser in the Food Recovery Challenge to encourage and promote source reduction as well as other Food Recovery Challenge efforts. Well,
Just click anywhere on the screen, and they should be able to hit the down arrow. It should advance it.
yeah, it's freezing, sorry. Okay, so here's a really brief overview of some of our programs and services that my office provides. We offer a very wide variety of programs ranging from environmental education to policies and procedures, but one of our most important and more recent focuses is promoting food waste reduction and awareness. Our office joined the Food Recovery Challenge in 2017, and so I'm going to focus specifically on our endeavors for that year, which is the year for our award. Our main goal was to create programming that could provide the technical assistance and funding necessary to educate Tennesseans on the importance of food recovery, diversion, and reduction. So the first way we did this was to host a food waste workshop in Middle Tennessee for stakeholders. This allowed us to not only gauge the awareness level of food waste locally, but also to learn the wants and needs of interested parties who wanted to make a change, but maybe didn't necessarily have the resources to do so. So all of our food recovery and awareness efforts were driven by the results of this workshop. So throughout the course of the year, we assisted 6 of our Tennessee State Park restaurants to register as participants for the Food Recovery Challenge, and I will dive into this later in the presentation. We also launched our statewide initiative, the Get Food Smart Tennessee program, that is endorsed by Governor Haslam, and I will talk about this a little bit more on the next slide. We also developed an organics management grant, which funded projects that raised awareness relating to or either directly supported the reduction, recovery, and diversion of food waste. The grant dollars total awarded were $3.7 million, and the grant went to support a diverse array of projects such as composting, operations, and organics collection receptacles at the Country Music Hall of Fame here in Nashville, actually. We also provided education and outreach at 19 different events throughout the year, as well as conducted numerous food waste audits in schools. And even though we are registered as an endorser for the Food Recovery Challenge, we decided we wanted to lead by example and started our own employee-run organics collection in TDEC offices. So the Get Food Smart Tennessee program promotes food recovery by encouraging consumers to buy only what they need, eat what they buy, and then to share what isn't. So participants, including businesses, industries, schools, restaurants, hospitality operations, and consumers, are all targeted by this program. It also includes a website that educates the public on food waste, as well as a statewide recognition program. When you go to the website, individuals can take a pledge to reduce food waste in their home. So I encourage you to visit the website when you get a chance. And here are some of the marketing materials we use for this program. The first one is actually a brochure specifically targeting consumers, but it can be applicable to organizations as well. And then these are some signs that we found to be very effective because they combine both a visual with a number. So we provide these signs and the brochures to members of the Get Food Smart program, and then we also use them for our own awareness campaign. So, as I mentioned, TDEC registered as an endorser for the Food Recovery Challenge in 2017, and then we assisted 6 Tennessee state parks to register as participants. The biggest difference between the endorser and the participant is that we, as an endorser, do not actually produce any food waste. We don't have an operation, such as a restaurant, that generates organic materials. So our main goal is to create awareness for food recovery and to encourage organizations to register for the Food Recovery Challenge. Tennessee State Parks, as a participant, do generate food waste in their operations. So therefore, they were a perfect target to educate on food recovery and source reduction. So as a part of our initial training with the park restaurants, we educated the staff on the food recovery hierarchy, which was discussed previously. Since the most important part of the Food Recovery Challenge is the actual measurement of the materials, we wanted to make sure it was as easy as possible for our participants to understand and to keep a record of this data. So we simplified the food recovery hierarchy into these 3 main categories: diversion, donation, and composting. So throughout this presentation, when I refer to diversion, I'm also referring to source reduction. That is just how we labeled it for our efforts in the state parks. So after we gauged the initial interest of the restaurants and received confirmation that they wanted to participate, we immediately started with an on-site and in-depth training. The most important part of this training was making sure that all the appropriate personnel were present. This included the restaurant front of house, the back of house staff, park rangers, maintenance personnel, hospitality managers, restaurant managers, basically anyone who would be involved anywhere along the line of the organics management program needed to be present at that initial training. Next, we provided the necessary materials that the restaurant staff would need to manage the organic materials for this program. So like I said, we wanted to make this as easy as possible to participate in and remove any barriers that one might have to participate in, such as funding for the equipment. So we provided food scales necessary to weigh and track all of the diverted, donated, and composted food. The scale that Scott showed earlier was actually a floor scale for larger weights such as composting, but we also provided like countertop food grade scales to weigh all of the diverted food. And then we also provided any organics collection containers needed and the educational signage for the staff to use as reference guides. For the restaurants that chose to compost on site, we also conducted a site assessment for their location to ensure that the grade and proximity would be sufficient. And then we also hosted a training seminar to educate the rangers and maintenance staff who would be managing the compost on proper organics management procedures. So, what exactly did we include in our training and why was it so successful? So one of the most important aspects of the food recovery training was the background or the reasoning of the program. Like Scott mentioned, it is very important for them to know why it is that they're doing what they're doing, why they're putting forth all of this extra effort to separate and weigh and report and track all of this food. So if you don't have the why, it is very easy for the participants to lose interest and just quit trying. This is another reason why it's so important to have all the personnel present for the training as well. The restaurant manager, for example, may understand and fully support the mission of the program, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the busboy or the person in the dish pit feels the same way. It takes understanding and cooperation from everyone to have a smooth and successful operation. So next, our training focused specifically on food waste in the U.S., but then we also brought it close to home by showing them data on food insecurity in Tennessee, as well as in their local county. We actually got those numbers and showed it to them as close to home as possible. We also explained the connection between food waste and food insecurity and why the proper management of food is so critical. And then we, of course, explained the cost savings associated with the improvement of management processes, efficiencies, and overall waste reduction. Next, we did an overview of the Food Recovery Challenge, explaining what the program is, the difference between a participant and an endorser, and basically the responsibilities that they would have as a participant. We also made sure that they understood that each category of the program was voluntary. So they didn't have to participate in all three. They didn't have to divert, donate, and compost. They could just choose diversion if they wanted to. And then lastly, and most importantly, we spent a large portion of the program explaining what exactly each of those categories meant. And then we discussed which methods would be best for that particular restaurant location. We explained what diversion and source reduction looks like, gave them examples, and showed them how and when to weigh it, which was very important. We did the same thing with all of these categories. One of the most important things to remember in keeping accurate and meaningful records is that not only is it important to separate the logs or data for the diverted, donated, and composted food, but it's also important to keep a record of the actual food waste, if there is any, that's disposed. And this way you can use that information to track your actual diversion rate and keep up with improvement throughout the participation of the program. Here's some examples of some of the most successful and effective diversion or source reduction methods that we saw in the parks that were participating. First, having an on-site garden is a huge benefit for multiple reasons, but it also helps with reducing food waste greatly. We encouraged the participants to implement a just-in-time purchasing system, as Montgomery Bell did, and several of the other parks participating did as well. This is obviously very easy if you have an on-site garden because you can just harvest it as it's needed. But for most restaurants, it can make a huge impact on food waste and monetary savings as well. For instance, some of our restaurants do catering for events or larger groups. Instead of purchasing all of the special items necessary a month or more in advance, they now try to wait until the last possible minute, say a week or two before the actual event, to avoid over-purchasing in case the head count or something with the event changes. This more efficient purchasing method results in less food waste as well as less financial waste due to over-purchasing of maybe a special one-time menu item that would have otherwise gone to waste. We also encourage the proper storage of food items as well as organization tips. Some of our restaurants offer buffet for breakfast, lunch, dinner on weekdays and weekends. And as I'm sure most of you know, buffets are one of the largest producers of food waste. However, their customers enjoy the buffet and they expect the buffet. So completely eliminating these would have resulted in a serious hit to the restaurants. So what we did was advised several different ways to reduce the food waste impact from the buffet while maintaining their customer satisfaction. For weekdays or lunchtime, we switched in some restaurants to menu-only ordering, and this of course means that their portion size would be controlled, which results in less food waste. And in fact, we had one restaurant who opted to completely reduce their buffet to once a week on Sundays, and has seen significant reductions in food waste since that implementation. And then, of course, as Scott mentioned, providing smaller serving utensils and allowing the items on the buffet to be 100% consumed before replacing them also are really good diversion methods. And then just in general, menu ordering, make an effort to observe and keep track of the items that are consistently being wasted, such as French fries, for example, and then adjust the serving portion as needed to reduce the waste. So this is Henry Horton State Park, and they have their own on-site garden, and this allows them to use fresh herbs and produce in their restaurant. Now, not only does this reduce their food waste since they are able to harvest it as needed, but it also results in more sustainably sourced food and less packaging, as well as healthier options for their restaurant guests. They actually even incorporate their on-site compost from participating in the Food Recovery Challenge into this garden. So that's pretty neat as well. Here are some examples of storage techniques that we also educate our participants on. So proper storage is really critical to make sure your produce and other food supplies last as long as possible. It's very important that they are stored in not only the proper place, but also the proper temperature. So we provided participants with examples of proper storage locations and temperatures, as well as other methods to preserve produce longer than avoid storage. So cloth bags versus plastic bags can be one example of that. And then, like I previously mentioned, organization is key. With proper organization, you can ensure that the staff is using the oldest products first so that they don't expire and go to waste. And it's also easier to monitor your inventory levels if everything is neatly organized. This can also help with the just-in-time purchasing system so that you know how much of something you truly have, and this way you can avoid bulk purchasing, which can result in a lot of waste. These are some really good tips on reusing food. So after you've implemented all of the other source reduction tasks that we just discussed, there are still a few ways that you can repurpose or reuse your food items so that they still get used to their fullest potential and avoid being discarded. So some of the most successful repurposing techniques that the state parks have implemented are using leftover fruit, biscuits, and other breads like that in cobblers and desserts. And then also using leftover bread for making house-made croutons has been a really big hit in some of the restaurants. But all of these diversion techniques we used in our training were sourced from the EPA's Guide for Food Services and Restaurants, so I highly recommend reviewing it. It has a lot of really good tips and techniques in it. And lastly, several of the state parks participate in the donation portion as well, and partner with either a local nonprofit organization or a church to accept any leftover food that by health codes cannot be reserved in the restaurant or on the buffet, but they're still perfectly good for human consumption. So TDEC as an endorser tries to provide support in creating these partnerships, as well as assistance if any issues arise to make sure that both parties are happy and benefiting from this partnership. And we also always make sure that both parties are aware of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act to provide assurances when donating the food. Okay, so here is a compilation of all 6 Tennessee State Park restaurants data for both 2017 and 2018 years of participation in the Food Recovery Challenge. Like Scott mentioned, all 6 state parks participating report this data to me so that I can keep a track of their numbers and see maybe where they hold space for improvement or something similar like that. Some chose to do a test run of sorts when they were implementing the practices to ensure that their staff could handle the new responsibilities before they actually recorded the data. But Montgomery Bell was the first park to register in February of 2017, and that's their data all the way until midsummer when some of the other parks started registering as participants as well. And then here's just a visual of how many tons of food waste that the 6 restaurants in Tennessee have been able to divert from landfills in just 2 years. So 142 tons total, and that's comprehensive of all of their diversion, donation, and composting numbers. So one unique thing that our park system has that was released in November of 2017 is the Go Green guidelines. Scott mentioned the Go Green With Us program, which originally was created in 2015 as a recycling initiative. But in 2017, we released these guidelines that the parks use to incorporate sustainability basically in all of their operations. It's kind of similar to a LEED rating system where they can earn a score for their overall sustainability, but for park operations. And as you can see, there are 10 different categories, and category 3 specifically focuses on food and restaurants. So we were actually able to incorporate the food recovery challenge into these guidelines so that the participating restaurants can receive points and recognition for their food recovery efforts. So, in conclusion, here are some of the key factors that were vital in the success of our food recovery efforts and program. So most importantly, it was driven by stakeholders. We listened to the individuals and tried to meet their needs. We provided thorough and informative trainings. We made sure that all the necessary parties were present and provided reference guides to the staff for once the training was over. The recognition and awareness program that targets all food waste producers from consumers to industry. And then most importantly, we lead by example. It's one of TDEC's main initiatives to lead by example, and we did that by getting our hands dirty with food waste reduction projects and implementing our own food waste reduction program internally. And then there is our letter for our Food Recovery Challenge Award. So, thank you very much. Do I have any questions?
Yes, congratulations on that congratulatory letter, Kelsey, and thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. We've got about 6 minutes or so we can take a couple of questions for Kelsey, and then if we have time, we can open it up to additional questions. There was one question I just wanted to get to first. Somebody asked if the Food Recovery Challenge is a yearly challenge. Organizations can join the Food Recovery Challenge at any time of the year. What we do, though, is we recognize once per year with awards and recognition. That's a once per year process where we compare participants' data, 2 years worth of data. What questions do we have, Jorge, for Kelsey?
Okay, did Tennessee fund grants to any organizations, including nonprofits and private industry?
Yes, so the organics management grant that I mentioned earlier went to several different organizations like that. One of them was a private distribution hub for food recovery. One of them was for composting operations, and then one of them went to the Country Music Hall of Fame, which is a private business. So.
Okay, what is the key to teaching the impact of food waste source reductions on food insecurity among the neighbors who live in their county?
Repeat that. What's the key to what?
Sorry, pardon me. What is the key to teaching the impact of food waste source reduction on food insecurity among the neighbors who live in the county?
I think the key that we realized is really going back to the why it's important for us wasting so much food when there is so much food insecurity. And when people realize how much food insecurity there is in their county, a lot of people aren't even aware of it. And it's really all about creating that awareness in the first place, and then having the tools necessary to provide them a means to those outlets, having the tools necessary to show them where they can donate and how they can get involved.
Okay. I have a question for Scott here. Bear with me 1 second. They just wanted to know, for composting, was it done on-site or was it sent out?
Yes, our composting is done on site here at a pre-selected place near the back of our park. Office of Sustainability came down and, like Kelsey said, and checked out the area and made sure that it was appropriate for composting.
Okay, and also for your guests that are staying at the inn, if they bring food into their rooms, are there compost bins or recycling bins in the rooms? We
do have recycling bins in all of the rooms, but we don't have composting bins. That's a nice suggestion, though. Hadn't thought of that.
Okay, thank you. We do have 3 minutes. Andre, do you have any closing remarks?
Are there any other questions for them? I thought I saw a couple people ask a question about measurement. One person asked if, I think Tennessee State Parks was using lean path, or what kind of measurement device or instrumentation was being used at both Boulder County Jail and Tennessee State Parks.
I'm going to defer to Kelsey on this one.
I can speak for Boulder County. In terms of measurement of our data, we get scale data from the halls that we have of our compostable material. And then also we input data into the retrack system to track it overall.
Yes, ours is the same way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much to our speakers, Cody, Tim, Scott, and Kelsey, for their public service and sharing how to prevent excess food upstream with a source reduction approach. We plan to post the webinar in about 2 weeks or so to epa.gov/SMM. Stay tuned for our April 25th webinar on EPA's waste reduction model, which helps organizations track their greenhouse gas emissions reductions from different materials management practices. I think I hear that lunch bell calling. So that'll conclude today's session. Goodbye and bon appetit.